Welcome to Daily Exchange, guys. We're here with Jeff Dorman from Arca. He's the Chief Investment Officer, and we're talking all about, is it time to buy Bitcoin? All right, guys, we're back. We're here with Jeff. Welcome to the Daily Exchange.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Jeff, tell us about your background and how you could, I guess, make a prediction on the market. Where are you? Where are you from? What's the stick?
Sure, I'm a traditional finance guy. I was an investment banker at Lehman Brothers. I was a trader at Merrill Lynch. I ran a portfolio of equity and fixed income at Citadel and a couple other smaller hedge funds. Okay. And then I ran a technology company for 5 years. So I've been in and around trading, asset management, and technology my whole career. Okay. Now, so let's tell us. This number one question. So you're obviously a trader. How do you trade? Are you a technical analysis guy? Tell us about your trading style. Sure. I think technical analysis needs to be appreciated and used by everyone as an overlay to other strategies, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the only strategy. So I'm more of a fundamental guy. I look for entry points either based on fundamental research where we really believe that this is going to be groundbreaking technology and something that's going to move higher for 12 to 36 months. And I also look for event-driven trades, things that have very specific 1 to 3 month hard catalysts where we can make money in a short period of time and eliminate the market risk as much as possible over that time.
Okay. Now, tell us, the question right now, Bitcoin's moved up a lot. Is it time to buy Bitcoin now?
It's always time to buy Bitcoin. Independent of market timing, which is always fun. It's always fun to call tops and bottoms. The reality is, if you're trying to buy Bitcoin, you're supposed to be dollar cost averaging at the highs, at the lows, and all the way in between. So there's no real reason for something as important to this ecosystem as Bitcoin to try to buy at a specific moment in time. You want to keep buying as it goes lower. You want to keep buying as it goes higher, because this is something that is really transformational and over longer periods of time is going to continue to go higher.
So in your analysis, do you think Bitcoin's going to survive, like continue on?
Yeah, and the way we look at risk at Arca is we're always looking for the probability-weighted best return, right? Right now, Bitcoin may not offer the highest absolute return, but from a probability-weighted standpoint, it is by far the best risk-adjusted return because Bitcoin has such a longer, such a head start over all the other digital assets right now, and it's just such a household name relative to some of the other digital assets right now. So yeah, I absolutely believe that Bitcoin's going nowhere. It's staying. It's going to be in everybody's wallets, and this is a really a once every couple of generations type of technology that you want to have a piece of.
Okay. Now, with there's a lot of questions right now around mining and how that might adapt, and with the block rewards going, say, 2023 to 6.25. Have you put that into your analysis in terms of the risk, where transaction fees need to cover the cost? Are you worried about that?
Worried isn't the right word. I mean, from a very simplistic standpoint, anytime you're reducing the supply of something and demand stays the same, obviously price goes higher, right? That's a very simple economic model. Now, whether or not the transaction volume will be high enough to continue to incentivize the miners to stay in the network and keep the security going, there's really no way to answer that other than if this continues to grow at the pace that it has with more wallet adoption, with more merchant adoption, I don't think that transaction volume is going to be a problem.
Okay. Now, you run a Arca. Tell us about Arca.
Sure. Arca is a full-service investment management firm focused specifically on investing in digital assets for institutional investors. So we build institutional caliber products. And we not only invest in digital assets and equity in blockchain companies, we're also using blockchain as a wrapper to introduce other asset classes into this ecosystem. Okay. Now, so do people come to you and do they buy Bitcoin? Are they invested, or institutions buying Bitcoin with you guys? A lot of times institutions will buy Bitcoin directly themselves, but they might also have an allocation to our firm because we are offering a slightly different risk profile. The way institutional investors really think is they want to have a diversified exposure to an asset class, not necessarily just one piece of that asset class. So in the equity world, for instance, you might see a pension fund or an endowment buy a little bit of Apple specific by themselves, but they might also be invested in a technology long-short hedge fund. That's similar to how they're looking at crypto right now. They might own Bitcoin. They're probably not going to own the rest, but if they want exposure to the rest, they'll hire someone like myself to manage it for them. Okay. Now, what assets are you interested in right now? Like, what's moving that's catching your eye? Sure. We try to be very bottom up with the way we analyze things. So we're looking first and foremost for tokens that have good tokenomics, meaning like the tokens actually make sense, they are easy to value, and they actually are rewarding the people who are buying them in some capacity. We look for sectors that are really interesting. So right now, gaming is a sector that we're very much behind right now. We're invested in names like Decentraland, Engine, and Loom, things that we really believe are going to help move gamers into this ecosystem. And then after that, we look for, like I said, a venture-driven investment ideas. So it's anything that has a specific catalyst, anything that has something coming up that we can analyze. So, for instance, we're looking very hard at this Bitfinex deal. I know that's controversial because Bitfinex and Tether have had a misappropriation of funds, but the token itself that Bitfinex is issuing right now to fill that capital hole, it's very timely. There's only about a 2-week window to get in. You can buy it. The token makes a lot of sense. They're going to use cash flow sweeps to pay down the token over time. And that's something that if you can get your hands on, I think has very good risk-reward characteristics for investors.
Okay, interesting. And now, I guess when you work in creating new assets, tell us about that.
Sure. So if you think about ETFs in the equity world or in the fixed income world, the ETF itself didn't actually create anything new, right? What it did was it became a better vehicle to buy stuff that already existed. You buy an ETF now to have exposure to stocks or to have exposure to bonds or have exposure to gold. That already existed through mutual funds or direct purchases, but the ETF was just a smarter wrapper. It made it easier to buy, and it also gave you the ability to buy different types of combinations of those things. That's how we feel the blockchain is doing as well. So we can take existing assets like fixed income and equities and hard assets and tokenize them, put them on blockchain, and issue them to investors and do one of two things. Either we're going to make it more seamless to invest and make the costs lower for investors, or we're going to introduce them to something that they couldn't have gotten otherwise.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of people right now as well who are really passionate about Bitcoin, just Bitcoin and Bitcoin only.
Yep.
What do you think about, I guess they sometimes call them Bitcoin, I guess, maximalists, or I'm not sure, it depends on the terminology, but they're only interested in that. What do you think about that in terms of an investment approach?
Sure. I think in general, it's never good to be myopic. I spent 10 years of my life on Wall Street. All I did was equities and bonds, and I thought I knew everything because I knew equities and bonds so well. And then you move out from New York to LA, and you see, there's a lot of other things going on. There's people involved in AR and VR. There's people involved in crypto, cannabis. So, in general, being myopic is never good. So the idea of being a Bitcoin maximalist to me is just short-sighted, regardless of whether they turn out to be right or not. That being said, I get it. Some people don't think this is an asset class. They really think it's Bitcoin and a lot of other noise. I personally don't share that view. I think that each specific digital asset and token is solving a different purpose. Like anything in life, some are going to do well, some aren't, and you're going to see a real bifurcation of the haves and the have-nots over time. But I certainly don't think that you can dismiss everything else that is being built just because you prefer Bitcoin or because that you like Bitcoin better.
Now, there are a number of forks of Bitcoin as well, and obviously this idea of having bigger blocks and things like that, and that's like a big topic right now. Do you have a view on that? Does that factor into your models?
Yeah, I think the idea of forking is really interesting because what it basically tells you is that the code itself means nothing. It's the community and the people that rally behind it that matters. So you can boil that down to one word, which is distribution, or maybe another word, marketing. Just like in anything, there are good products all the time that fail because they had bad distribution and bad marketing efforts, and you have bad products that succeed because they were better at distribution and marketing. And I think when you think about a fork, whether it's a Bitcoin fork or any other chain, what matters is what happens afterward. Are you really doing something that novel and new? Maybe, maybe not. It probably doesn't matter as much as can you market that and can you sell that vision, right? So when you look at what happened to Bitcoin Satoshi Vision recently and Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision failed to get anyone to care about it. That's really the bottom line. And that's why it has underperformed so much versus Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash itself, not being used that often yet from a transaction standpoint, but they've done a better job of at least building a community and building interest. So I think you can do a little bit of a fake it till you make it and ultimately build that community, build that interest, and then later figure out what the right use case for that token is.
Interesting. Now, with, I guess, Bitcoin's dominating right now, I'd say 58% of the market. Mm-hmm. Do you look at that, as a good thing, or do you see that as like because a traditional market, I don't think operates in that way, but something controls so much of it. How do you view that in that dominance?
Well, don't forget also that when you're talking about just the tokens itself, so Bitcoin is 60% dominance of the digital asset tokens. There's also a whole other ecosystem outside that doesn't have tokens. You've got equity in companies like Coinbase and Binance, the picks and shovels companies, as we call them, the ones that are helping to build the infrastructure that allows us to own and invest in these digital assets. So Bitcoin dominance is not that high relative to the overall ecosystem. It's just high relative to the other tokens that you can actually buy. That being said, I think it's okay right now. This is still relatively new. It's better for one thing to be on everybody's radar and become a household name. Like my 73-year-old mom knows what Bitcoin is. My dad knows what Bitcoin is. He has no idea what everything else is. So from an adoption standpoint and just a knowledge standpoint, it's okay for one thing to dominate. But ultimately, as this ecosystem grows, it can't stay that way. You're going to have, again, those haves and have-nots. And that means some of the newer players rise to the top and the other ones fall off.
Okay. Anything you're interested in, and I guess, what's your 3-year sort of term outlook right now, or even 5-year? What are you interested in those time periods?
In terms of investing specifically?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good question, because we like I said, we look at two different buckets of risk at Arca. We look at the long-term bucket, 12 to 36 months, and we look at that short-term catalyst bucket. When we're looking at that longer-term bucket, we're looking for tokens and investments that are really transformational, that are doing something so big that the adoption is going to be massive, and you end up getting that Metcalfe's law, where you end up having network value being proportional to the sum of to the square of the number of users. So the more users you get, you have a disproportional return on that investment. And to do that, you have to think about sectors and themes and tokenomics like I talked about. So whether that's exchanges are doing very well right now, and that's definitely a theme we like. The gaming sector, like I said, most new technologies tend to gravitate towards gamers in the beginning because they're used to adopting new technologies. And then further out, I think, figuring out what really ultimately becomes that store of value and that medium of exchange. And right now, that's for sure Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a head start on everything, but things change very rapidly. And that's why I said, you can't be so myopic that you dismiss what's coming. And you look at the people who thought Lyft was a joke when Uber was dominating. Well, there was clearly room for 2 players in the space, and probably much more. Right? Burger King and Pepsi used to partner because they knew that Coke and McDonald's were number 1. Well, the number 2s have done pretty well. So you can't dismiss everything just because one is the leader. When you have an ecosystem that is the potential for the ecosystem is so big that you're going to have multiple winners.
Right. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Exchange. We have one last question, but before we go, we ask everyone, this is not financial advice, you can answer it however you want.
Sure.
What do you think the price of Bitcoin is going to be at the end of 2019? The clock strikes 12 on New Year's Eve, switching into 2020. What's your in US dollars, what do you think the price might be?
So I never make price predictions.
Okay.
What I will say is by New Year's Eve, I predict that Bitcoin is going to be in hundreds of millions of people's wallets. That's what I know for sure. And if that happens, the price is going to be a lot higher than where it is today.
Brilliant stuff. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Exchange.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys, that is Jeff talking from Arca about everything to do with, is now time to buy Bitcoin? He says continuously, buy Bitcoin. Got you guys. Yeah.